In the year 1453, in the smoldering ruins of what was once the greatest city in Christendom, the Genoese merchant Giacomo Tedaldi recorded something that would haunt the courts of Europe for decades to come. He watched as victorious Ottoman soldiers systematically separated the wives of defeated Byzantine warriors from their children. But death was not their fate. What happened next was far worse. A calculated and perfected program of psychological destruction, a conquest not of the body but of the soul itself. These women, the widows of heroes and nobles, were destined for a fate so horrific that many historians for centuries refused to document it fully. Tedaldi's eyewitness account is one of our most detailed records of this practice. But he was not alone. Diplomatic correspondence, survivor testimonies, and the Ottoman Empire's own chillingly precise administrative records all reveal the same systematic approach to the families of their defeated enemies. The Ottomans did not just conquer territories. They conquered bloodlines. When a city fell, Ottoman commanders had detailed protocols. Male warriors were typically executed or enslaved, but their wives, the living symbols of their culture and lineage, faced something far more calculated. They were not just spoils of war. They were strategic assets in a sophisticated psychological campaign designed to annihilate a people's will to resist forever. This was not sadism for its own sake. It was a brutal long-term strategy of empire building. The Ottomans understood a profound truth. To permanently hold a conquered land, you must break its spirit. To do that, you must destroy its memory. And the memory of a people is carried in its women and passed to its children. This policy of psychological warfare was designed to sever that sacred chain, ensuring that the next generation would have no connection to the culture, the religion, or the fathers who had died fighting the empire. It was a conquest designed to be permanent. The process began immediately, after a battle with what Ottoman records clinically refer to as family dissolution. Wives of defeated warriors were forcibly separated from their children, often within hours of their husbands' deaths. This was not random chaos. It was methodical. Ottoman officials had lists prepared in advance identifying the families of military leaders and nobles. These women were considered high-value targets. Children under the age of 10 were often taken for the Devshirme system while their mothers were told they had been killed, a lie designed to inflict immediate and devastating trauma. The women were then transported to holding facilities to undergo identity erasure. They were stripped of their clothing, jewelry, and any personal items. Their names were taken away, replaced with numbers or generic Turkish names. But this was just the beginning. What followed was a step-by-step process of systematic demoralization designed to break their mental resistance completely. The first phase involved forced, humiliating conversion ceremonies where they had to publicly renounce their faith. Those who complied were told they had betrayed their dead husbands. Those who refused faced starvation. The second phase was designed to weaponize their maternal instincts. They were forced to care for Ottoman children, sometimes even nursing the babies of the very men who had killed their husbands, all while being told their own children were dead. Perhaps the most psychologically devastating tactic was the false hope system. Periodically, officials would tell these women their children were alive and could be reunited, but only if they performed degrading tasks or provided intelligence. This created a torturous cycle of hope and despair that many survivors described as worse than any physical pain. They would comply only to be told their children had actually died years earlier, or that just one more thing was required. The third phase involved forced marriages, psychological torture disguised as legal unions. The women were often forced to marry the very soldiers who had participated in the conquest of their cities and the killing of their husbands. The rules of these new marriages were designed for maximum psychological damage. They were required to cook meals using recipes from their homeland, a constant bitter reminder of the life that had been stolen from them. Any sign of grief for their dead husbands was severely punished. They had to perform gratitude for their new lives while suffocating under the weight of their trauma. This systematic destruction is not mere speculation. It is documented in the empire's own records. One of the most detailed cases involves a woman known only as Martyr of Trebizond. After the fall of the city in 1461, Martyr, the wife of a Byzantine commander, was told her 3 young children had been executed. In reality, they had been taken for the Devshirme system. She was forced to marry a janissary who had personally participated in the siege that killed her husband. For 15 years, she was required to cook Byzantine recipes for his dinner parties, where Ottoman officers would mock the weakness of her culture. In a letter she hid inside a wall of her home, discovered in 1987, she wrote, "I dream of my children's faces every night, but I can no longer remember their voices. I have borne him 2 sons and I love them, but they will never know their mother was once free. The children born from these unions face their own torment." Martyr's Ottoman-born sons grew up as loyal Ottomans but sensed their mother's hidden grief. One of them, Ali, became a janissary, but suffered from what officials called strange melancholies, where he would stare at Byzantine ruins for hours. His brother, Osman, wrote as an adult, "My mother would sometimes weep while cooking, but when I asked why, she would smile and say she was happy. I knew she was lying, but I could never understand what made her so sad." The mothers were forbidden from passing down their culture. Martyr was caught teaching her son a Byzantine lullaby and was publicly whipped as an example. This created a generation of children who inherited a trauma they could never name. The sheer scale of this operation is what makes it so disturbing. This was not the act of a few rogue commanders. It was state-sponsored psychological warfare refined and perfected over 400 years. The most chilling evidence comes from the Ottoman state archives themselves. Training manuals for provincial administrators contain step-by-step instructions for these tactics. One manual from 1521, titled "Methods for Ensuring Complete Submission of Enemy Wives," recommends telling women their children are dead for exactly 6 months before revealing they are alive, as this creates optimal despair, followed by desperate gratitude. Governors would send quarterly reports back to Constantinople detailing their success rates, writing about human suffering with the same cold bureaucratic language used for crop yields. A report from 1594 states, "The implementation of the new maternal separation protocols has resulted in a 40% increase in compliance rates." This was the true Ottoman conquest. It was a war fought not just on the battlefield with swords and cannons, but in the quiet rooms where women were held captive, in the nurseries where children were raised, and in the deepest corners of the human mind. The empire finally abandoned these practices in the 19th century, not from a moral awakening, but because European diplomatic pressure made them politically costly. But the damage was done. The trauma inflicted on hundreds of thousands of women created generational cycles of pain that lasted for centuries. And it raises a final disturbing question. In 2022, ground-penetrating radar at former Ottoman administrative sites revealed hidden chambers containing thousands of personal items, jewelry, letters, children's toys that appear to have been systematically collected. If the Ottomans were willing to hide evidence of psychological warfare techniques that went beyond what they officially documented, what other systematic programs of human destruction are still buried in archives around the world, waiting to reveal how far civilizations have gone to break the human spirit? The conquest of territory is visible in maps and treaties, but the conquest of the soul, the deliberate destruction of identity, memory, and family bonds, leaves scars that persist across generations, invisible but indelible. This is the story that history tried to forget, but the evidence demands we remember.